I am Sienna, 35 years old, and somehow still recovering from the profound trauma inflicted by my own family. As a highly successful real estate developer, I escaped their suffocating toxicity years ago, but I still keep in touch, occasionally bound by an invisible thread of guilt. Last Sunday, my parents invited me to a lavish engagement dinner for my older sister Victoria. Between sips of expensive imported champagne and bites of buttered toast, my mother leaned forward, smirking across the table. Sienna, you know you are incredibly lucky we still invite you to these elegant family gatherings. Try not to embarrass Victoria today. Pity works absolute wonders. I just took a slow sip of coffee and smiled politely. That night, I logged into my corporate account, finalized the acquisition of the very restaurant they were dining in, and emailed my legal team about tripling their rent. Before continuing this story, let me know where you started reading in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you have ever faced family members who constantly underestimated your true worth. Growing up in a wealthy neighborhood in Fairfield, Connecticut meant being incredibly privileged to outsiders. But inside our sprawling colonial home, a deep emotional coldness permeated every single corner. Our massive four-bedroom house, with its neatly manicured green lawn and heated swimming pool, was a daunting fortress of unrealistic expectations I could never possibly meet. My childhood bedroom, painted pale blue, at my mother Elaine's strict request, despite my clear preference for green, became my silent prison sanctuary. From elementary school through high school, I maintained my upright character while quietly participating in elite student councils and volunteering at local charities. But nothing was ever enough for them. The story opens mid-action, plunging straight into the chaos. Victoria forcefully slams the leather bill folder for the engagement dinner onto the custom marble table right in front of me, rattling the crystal glasses. Her fiancé, a smug investment banker named Preston, stands closely beside her, arrogantly tracing his manicured fingers over his expensive gold watch. Victoria loudly demands that I pay the entire $6,000 check immediately, telling me to use whatever meager savings I have managed to scrape together and then pack my trash and leave. She arrogantly boasts about her newly acquired position as a senior executive at our father's prestigious firm, loudly claiming her massive salary pays for the entire family's luxury lifestyle. Our mother chimes in, making a highly classist, racially charged jab about me returning to my low-income roots in the chaotic city. I do not cry. I refuse to give them the satisfaction of my tears. I calmly pull out my sleek black metal corporate card, stating clearly that I will take exactly what is legally mine, my absolute dignity, and leave this toxic environment immediately. You really thought you could just sit here and eat for free? Victoria sneers, her harsh voice echoing loudly across the private dining room, drawing stares from nearby tables. This beautiful dinner was organized to celebrate my bright future, a successful future you will never achieve. Pay the bill right now, Sienna, and leave. I looked down at the thick leather folder resting on the table. $6,420. My father, sitting comfortably at the head of the long table, swirls his expensive scotch and absolutely refuses to meet my intense gaze. Your sister is entirely right, he mutters dismissively, waving his hand. You contribute absolutely nothing to this prestigious family's legacy. The absolute least you can do today is cover the cost of the meal. Consider it a small tax for your constant, endless disappointments. I remember being 18 years old, standing nervously in our grand foyer with my college acceptance letter tightly clutched in my hand. I had earned a full academic scholarship to a top-tier architecture program. Instead of congratulating my hard work, Victoria had cruelly snatched the letter, laughed loudly, and deliberately tossed it into the burning fireplace, claiming I was only going to a cheap community college to avoid real adult work. My parents had watched the entire cruel spectacle unfold and said absolutely nothing. This toxic behavior was not an isolated anomaly. It was a deeply ingrained, systematic pattern of emotional abuse designed specifically to keep me permanently subjugated and feeling worthless. Well, My mother snaps impatiently, loudly snapping her manicured fingers directly in front of my face to break my concentration. Are you going to pay the bill, or are you going to beg for a pathetic handout like you always do? I slowly and deliberately reach into my designer purse. I am not begging for anything from any of you. I say, my voice remarkably steady, carrying a quiet, dangerous authority that makes Preston shift uncomfortably on his feet. I place my heavy black card gently onto the marble table. It is not just any standard credit card. It is a limitless corporate account directly tied to the commercial development firm I built entirely from nothing. Victoria's eyes narrow suspiciously as she recognizes the distinctive heavy thud of the solid metal card hitting the table. "What exactly is this?" she demands aggressively, snatching the card before the approaching waiter can reach it. "Did you steal this from someone? There is absolutely no way a struggling junior designer qualifies for a black card." "I am not a struggling junior designer," I reply smoothly, standing up slowly and smoothing the pristine fabric of my skirt. "And I did not steal anything. That card is registered to Horizon Group, the very firm that recently acquired this entire commercial block." My father finally looks up from his drink, his expression rapidly shifting from bored indifference to sharp, undeniable confusion. "Horizon Group. That is the multi-million-dollar conglomerate out of Seattle. What kind of ridiculous game are you playing at Sienna?" "I am playing the long game, father," I say confidently, signaling the restaurant manager who has been hovering nervously near the doorway. The manager approaches quickly, completely ignoring my stunned family, and bows his head respectfully toward me. "Miss Sienna is everything to your absolute satisfaction this evening?" he asks with deep reverence. My family stares at the scene in utter paralyzed shock. Victoria drops the heavy card back onto the table as if it had physically burned her fingers. "You actually know her?" she asks the manager, her voice trembling with sudden, terrifying uncertainty. "Miss Sienna is the new landlord of this establishment," the manager explains calmly, his voice ringing with finality. "She finalized the purchase of the building this afternoon." I look directly into my older sister's panicked eyes. "Enjoy your engagement dinner, Victoria. I will cover the bill this time, but do not worry about returning the favor. You will absolutely need every single penny of your new salary when you see the revised lease agreement I am drafting for our father's firm tomorrow morning. Since I now officially own the downtown office building your company operates from, I have decided to adjust the rent to reflect the current much higher market value." My mother gasps loudly, her hand flying defensively to her pearl necklace. "You bought our office building, how, with what money?" "With the money I earned while you were all busy underestimating me," I answer coolly. I pick up my expensive coat, feeling a profound, intoxicating sense of liberation wash over my entire being. For years, I had allowed their endless cruelty to define my personal worth. I had hidden my massive successes, fearing their bitter jealousy and inevitable retaliation. But standing here today, watching their carefully constructed social hierarchy crumble completely under the crushing weight of my reality, I finally understand that my true power was never theirs to take. I turn my back on their shocked, pale faces, walking out of the private dining room with my head held extremely high, finally ready to embrace the massive empire I built entirely on my own. But my night of settling scores is not over yet. I drive across town to the sprawling suburban estate I once shared with my soon-to-be ex-husband. The heavy oak door clicks shut behind me, sealing Marcus and his mistress inside the house I transformed into a masterpiece. I walk down the circular driveway with my head held high, the crisp evening air filling my lungs. Reaching my car, I slide into the leather seat and let out a long breath. My phone screen illuminates the dark interior as I pull up my contacts. I do not dial a friend for comfort or a family member for sympathy. I select the private number for my corporate logistics director. The phone rings twice before a crisp voice answers. "Operation Clean Slate is a go," I say, my tone stripped of any emotion. Marcus believes I am just a trophy wife with a knack for picking out pretty curtains. He does not know I am the founder and sole owner of Prestige, staging the largest luxury interior firm in the Southeast. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, and every smart system in that $2 million mansion belongs to my corporation. Deploy the midnight crew to the Atlanta property, I command. I want the entire place stripped down to the drywall by dawn. Take absolutely everything that we installed. I disconnect the call and put the car in gear, navigating toward the prestigious downtown hotel, where I maintain a permanent corporate suite. Let Marcus think he won this battle. Let Vanessa sneer about my humble beginnings. They are about to learn a very expensive lesson in property law. When Marcus signed that ironclad prenuptial agreement, he explicitly waived rights to my corporate assets. He assumed his salary paid for our lavish lifestyle, completely ignoring the fact that my company leased all the premium furnishings to him for $1 a month. That generous lease has now been officially terminated. Checking into my penthouse suite, I pour a glass of sparkling water and open my laptop. The GPS tracking software shows 5 commercial moving trucks already turning onto my former street. It is exactly midnight. My crews are trained to handle massive corporate relocations and luxury estate clearouts with absolute discretion and military precision. They possess master keys, security bypass codes, and a comprehensive inventory list of every single item my firm legally owns. I watch the live security feed from the front gate cameras as my logistics manager unlocks the main doors and gestures for the team to enter. Marcus is a heavy sleeper, a flaw he often bragged about. Even if Vanessa wakes up, there is absolutely nothing they can legally do to stop this repossession. My workers move swiftly and silently through the expansive first floor. I watch in grim satisfaction as 4 burly men carefully wrap the imported Italian leather sofas in protective padding. Another team meticulously dismantles the massive crystal chandeliers hanging in the grand foyer. They pack the hand-woven Persian rugs, the rare abstract paintings, and the custom mahogany dining table. Every single piece of elegance that made his mansion beautiful is rapidly disappearing. The kitchen is next. Marcus boasted that his impressive salary paid for the maintenance of his pristine culinary space. He forgot that the stainless steel commercial appliances were leased under my corporate umbrella. I observed the video feed as my technicians swiftly unhook the luxury smart refrigerator, the professional gas range, and the twin wine coolers. They disconnect the integrated espresso machine and gently load the heavy equipment onto padded dollies. The marble island where he slammed down the divorce papers now sits entirely barren, stripped of its designer bar stools and the elegant silver fruit bowl I personally selected. The digital sweep happens concurrently. Marcus enjoyed bragging about his fully automated smart home controlling the temperature, lighting, and security directly from a tablet. I type a command into my master terminal, securely disconnecting the primary hub. The house instantly reverts to a basic shell. All automated blinds roll up, exposing the dark windows. The ambient climate control shuts off completely. Even the custom surround sound speakers are physically removed from the ceiling mounts by my crew. Vanessa wanted to sleep in luxury, but she will wake up inside a cold, echoing warehouse, utterly devoid of any real modern comfort. Moving upstairs, the crew tackles the guest rooms and shared spaces with practiced efficiency. Every designer mattress, custom bed frame, and silk curtain is dismantled and bagged. They remove the expensive mirrors from the walls and unroll the plush carpets from the floors. I watch my lead foreman carefully pull the priceless silk sheets off the master bed where they are sleeping gracefully, replacing them with a single cheap cotton blanket. He then removes the decorative headboard without making a single sound. The sheer audacity of their betrayal blinded them to the reality of my absolute power over their environment. By 3 a.m, the mansion is completely hollowed out. 5 heavily loaded trucks idle quietly in the driveway, holding the entirety of Marcus's superficial success. The logistics manager sends a final confirmation text directly to my secure line, ensuring me the property is completely bare. There is nothing left but plain white walls and echoing wooden floors. They even packed the patio furniture and the expensive outdoor grill from the backyard. I instruct the team to leave the house keys neatly resting in the very center of the vast, empty kitchen floor. My work here is now concluded. I close my laptop and stand by the penthouse window, watching the city lights glitter below. Marcus wanted me to pack my trash, and leave completely unaware that his entire identity was built upon my hidden empire. When the sun finally rises, he will wake up in a desolate shell of a house, shivering without climate control, surrounded by nothing but the stark reality of his profound mistake. He will realize that returning to his impoverished roots was certainly never my destiny. It was always his. The journey to this absolute victory was not forged overnight. Sitting in the quiet luxury of my penthouse, I allow my mind to drift back to the agonizing months of secret preparation. Marcus always believed my frequent trips to downtown Atlanta were simply for high-end shopping sprees or mindless spa days. He genuinely thought the expensive designer bags I brought home were the peak of my daily achievements. He never knew that inside those pristine shopping bags were thick folders of blueprints, commercial lease agreements, and heavily encrypted hard drives. Building prestige. Staging and Horizon Group required a level of meticulous deception that almost broke me. In the early days, I operated out of a tiny windowless leased office under a fictional holding name. While Marcus was busy playing the charismatic CFO, spending his weekends on the golf course, and entertaining his mistresses, I was aggressively acquiring distressed commercial properties. I studied market trends until my eyes bled. I taught myself the intricate, predatory mechanics of mezzanine lending and shell corporations. David, who was then just a hungry junior corporate lawyer, was the first person to recognize my unyielding drive. Together we built a legal labyrinth so complex that my true net worth became entirely untraceable. The true turning point, however, occurred exactly 8 months ago. I was organizing Marcus's home office, a task he arrogantly delegated to me because he considered it domestic work, when I noticed a minor, seemingly insignificant discrepancy in his offshore tax filings. To a normal spouse, a missing decimal point, or a strange routing number to a Cayman Island subsidiary, might look like a simple clerical error. But to a woman who had secretly built a multi-million-dollar real estate empire, it was a glaring flashing siren. That night, after he fell into his heavy, arrogant sleep, I did not cry over the realization that my marriage was a financial lie. I went to work. I employed a team of elite shadow forensic accountants. Over the next 3 months, we meticulously tracked every single stolen dollar. I watched the digital trail lead from his prestigious corporate accounts directly to Vanessa's diamond necklaces, their luxurious overseas vacations, and eventually, to the massive down payment for Connor's fraudulent real estate venture. I compiled the evidence with cold surgical precision. Every forged signature, every illegal wire transfer, and every fake invoice was printed, cataloged, and securely locked in my private vault. I became the silent architect of his impending doom, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to detonate the explosive charges I had carefully placed under his entire fabricated life. My peaceful morning reflection is interrupted by a loud buzz from my phone. It is a message from the security firm I hired to monitor the Atlanta estate. The video link shows 2 familiar vehicles pulling up to the gates. Marcus called his reinforcements. I recognized the Porsche belonging to his sister Keisha and the Range Rover driven by her husband Connor. Connor is a corporate litigator who uses his wealth to destroy anyone he deems inferior. I grab my keys, leaving the penthouse, and drive across town to witness the meltdown. I arrive at the driveway as 2 police cruisers pull up, lights flashing. Marcus is pacing on the lawn, looking disheveled, while Keisha attempts to calm him. Connor has already intercepted the lead officer near the portico. I park a short distance away, stepping onto the paving stones with deliberate steps. The contrast between their panic and my stillness instantly aggravates Connor. He puffs out his chest aggressively, stepping directly into my path to intimidate me. "Officer, this is the woman I was telling you about." Connor barks, his voice carrying a tone of arrogance. He points a finger at my face, his expression twisted into a sneer. "She is a disgruntled ex-wife who suffered a psychotic break. She orchestrated a massive midnight raid on my brother-in-law's residence, stripping a marital asset down to the studs." The lead officer, a seasoned veteran wearing a graying mustache, looks annoyed by Connor's posturing. "Sir, as we informed Mr. Marcus this morning, this appears to be a civil dispute regarding property ownership, not a criminal burglary." Connor laughs, a harsh sound devoid of genuine humor. He runs a hand through his blonde hair. You clearly do not understand the magnitude of the grand larceny that occurred here today, he sneers. We are talking about millions of dollars in stolen luxury property. This is not a simple domestic dispute. This woman is a common thief. My elite legal team is drafting the felony warrants. She will be sitting in federal custody before noon. Keisha rushes over, linking her arm through her husband's, glaring at me with contempt. How could you do this to my brother Sienna? After everything this family has provided for you, you dragged him down to your miserable level. Provided for me? I ask softly, my voice steady and calm. Connor steps closer, his face turning an angry red. Do not play innocent with me. We all know where you came from, Sienna. You are nothing but a ghetto hustler who hit the jackpot marrying a successful man. You thought you could infiltrate our world, drain his accounts, and sneak away with the silver. You are delusional. My legal team will ensure you return to the poverty you crawled out of. I do not raise my voice. I simply stand there silently, watching him dig a hole of arrogance. I know for a fact that Marcus has spent our marriage feeding his family a fabricated narrative. He convinced them he was the sole provider funding our lifestyle while portraying me as his dependent charity case. Connor genuinely believes he is bravely defending a wealthy victim against a desperate thief. Are you finished talking? I ask, tilting my head. I have not even started. Connor threatens, aggressively jabbing his finger toward my shoulder, though he stops short of making physical contact. You think you are clever bringing moving trucks in the middle of the night, but you left a paper trail. You cannot steal $2 million worth of custom furnishings and expect to fence them on the black market. My private investigators are tracking those trucks right now. When we find your pathetic storage locker, we crush you. You messed with the wrong family today. Officer, I say, turning my attention to the weary policeman who has been observing the unhinged tirade. As I established with your colleagues last night, I am the founder and sole owner of Prestige Staging. Every item removed from this property was legally leased to Marcus under a corporate contract that he deliberately violated. Connor scoffs loudly, throwing his hands in the air. Prestige Staging. Do you honestly expect anyone to believe a low-income hustler owns the premier design firm in the Southeast? You are a junior assistant at best. You are lying to a sworn police officer, which is a serious felony. I will add to your criminal charges. I slowly reach into my designer handbag, my movements remarkably smooth and unhurried. I pull out a thick dossier containing the corporate lease agreements, the property deed, and the prenuptial agreement, explicitly separating my corporate holdings from his relatively meager personal assets. I hand the file to the officer, ignoring Connor's outstretched hand. You will find all the corporate documentation right there, including Mr. Marcus's signature, acknowledging that he does not own a single piece of furniture in this house, I explain. The officer opens the file, his eyes scanning the first few pages, before a look of dawning realization washes over his face. He glances at Marcus, who is currently hovering near the porch looking physically sick, and then looks back at Connor's face. Well, the officer says, closing the file with a decisive snap. It looks like the lady holds the winning hand, counselor. These corporate documents are airtight. Connor forcefully snatches the file from the officer's hand, his eyes frantically scanning the dense legal jargon. His face rapidly drains of color as he reads the ironclad clauses, the corporate asset protections, and the undeniable proof of my sole ownership. The realization that he just spent the last 10 minutes viciously insulting a woman who holds significantly more wealth and power than his entire family combined hits him like a physical blow. He slowly looks up from the papers, his mouth hanging open, the arrogant sneer wiped from his face. I offer him a small, chilling smile, letting the absolute reality of his profound mistake settle heavily over the quiet morning air. The lead officer hands the thick binder back to me with a respectful nod. He turns to Marcus, whose face has drained of all color, and clearly states that the police department will not intervene in a legitimate corporate asset relocation. Connor steps forward, his face flushed with rage, aggressively pointing his finger at my face. He threatens to have the officer fired, boasting about his close personal friendships with local judges and city politicians. The officer remains completely unfazed by the pathetic tantrum. He calmly advises Connor to step back before he is arrested for interfering with police duties. Keisha grabs her husband by the arm, pulling him away from the officers, her eyes darting nervously around the empty driveway. The two police cruisers slowly back out of the open gates, their tires crunching loudly on the gravel, leaving my former husband and his arrogant family standing completely powerless in the crisp morning air. I walk calmly back to my car, the gravel crunching satisfyingly beneath my designer shoes. I drive directly to my corporate headquarters, a sleek glass high-rise in the absolute center of the bustling financial district. When I step off the private elevator into my expansive executive suite, my lead assistant greets me with a warm, knowing smile and a fresh cup of dark espresso. She hands me a thick linen folder containing the morning updates. I sit behind my massive mahogany desk, opening the documents to survey the beautiful collateral damage of my carefully executed strategy. I did not just send a formal letter to seize Keisha's failing boutique. I orchestrated a flawless, highly visible corporate repossession designed to inflict maximum social damage. Keisha's luxury boutique was located in the most prestigious high-traffic outdoor shopping plaza in Atlanta, a place where image and reputation were absolute currency. She had used the $50,000 loan from my company not to improve her business model, but to fund her own lavish wardrobe and host exclusive champagne shopping events for her wealthy friends. At exactly 11 a.m. on a bustling Tuesday, when the plaza was packed with elite shoppers, my elite property management division descended upon her store. I sat comfortably in the back of my tinted Maybach, parked discreetly across the street, sipping a sparkling water as I watched the live execution of my revenge. 3 massive commercial moving trucks pulled up directly onto the manicured cobblestone street, completely blocking the entrance to her boutique. A team of 12 men, dressed in sharp black uniforms bearing the Horizon Group logo, marched toward the glass doors led by my ruthless lead property attorney, Sarah. Keisha was inside cheerfully pouring mimosas for 2 wealthy country club wives, entirely oblivious to the impending storm. Sarah pushed open the glass doors holding a thick legal binder. Even from across the street, I could see Keisha's arrogant smile instantly evaporate. Sarah slapped the heavy notice of default directly onto the glass display counter, officially declaring the immediate liquidation of the business due to corporate fraud and breach of contract. Keisha began screaming hysterically, frantically waving her hands and demanding they leave. But my crew moved with terrifying military precision. While Keisha was hyperventilating, the men systematically began stripping the store. They grabbed the racks of expensive imported silk dresses, tossing them unceremoniously into heavy cardboard boxes. They dismantled the crystal jewelry displays and carried out the velvet changing room sofas. The wealthy wives Keisha had been desperately trying to impress dropped their mimosas in sheer horror, scrambling out of the boutique to avoid being associated with the public humiliation. Connor arrived 10 minutes later in his leased SUV, his tires screeching against the curb. He sprinted toward the store, his face flushed dark red with fury, threatening to sue my entire legal team. But Sarah simply handed him a copy of the ironclad loan agreement, pointing directly to his own signature as the secondary guarantor. Connor's arrogant bravado completely shattered in front of dozens of whispering onlookers. He stood completely paralyzed on the sidewalk as my crew carried out the final mannequins and securely wrapped heavy steel chains around the glass door handles, snapping a massive padlock into place. A bright neon yellow notice of asset seizure was taped aggressively to the front window. In less than 45 minutes, Keisha's entire identity as a successful business owner was reduced to an empty, padlocked room. I rolled up the tinted window of my Maybach and ordered my driver to take me back to headquarters, utterly satisfied by the spectacular public destruction of their toxic vanity. I walk over to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my private office, gazing out over the sprawling city skyline. For so many years, I allowed their relentless emotional abuse to make me feel incredibly small and hopelessly insignificant. I hid my massive intelligence, my relentless drive, and my incredible financial success to avoid their bitter jealousy. I played the quiet, submissive wife while meticulously building an empire entirely in the shadows. But today, the shadows are gone forever. The brilliant sunlight warms my face completely. washing away the last lingering remnants of their cold, suffocating influence. The malicious whispers circulating through the country club network reach my executive office by midday, but they are nothing more than pathetic background noise to my current agenda. While Connor aggressively peddles his fabricated narrative of my impending bankruptcy to anyone who will listen, I am completely focused on the actual terrifying architecture of my expanding empire. I stand over the expansive mahogany drafting table in my private suite, unrolling the massive blueprints for an urban revitalization project my firm Horizon Group is currently spearheading. Years ago, my father stood in the grand foyer of our family home and silently watched Victoria burn my college acceptance letter to a prestigious architecture program. He genuinely believed that by remaining silent, he was passively maintaining the established patriarchal order of his household, completely unaware that his silence was the exact catalyst for my relentless, unyielding ambition. He thought I would simply fade into the background, a compliant daughter destined for a mediocre life. He was spectacularly wrong. My lead attorney David enters the spacious office, his sharp Italian suit immaculate as always. He places a thick, heavily redacted leather folder atop the blueprints. The final legal maneuvers regarding the Delaware subsidiary are officially complete, David announces, his voice laced with quiet professional satisfaction. Apex Capital Solutions is now fully integrated into your overarching corporate trust. The shell company structure is entirely impenetrable. Furthermore, the aggressive lending algorithms and predatory compliance clauses have been calibrated exactly to your specific instructions. I trace the sharp lines of a planned glass atrium on the blueprint, nodding slowly as the final pieces of my intricate puzzle snap into perfect position. In Connor's brokerage firm, are they desperate enough to blindly take the bait when the margin calls inevitably hit? Our financial analysts predict a critical catastrophic liquidity crisis for his holding company within the next 48 hours, directly triggered by Marcus's impending federal indictment. David explains, swiping across the screen of his silver tablet to display the projected fiscal models. When traditional banks instantly freeze Connor out of the legitimate lending market, Apex Capital will seamlessly position itself as the only entity responding to his frantic distress signals. We have drafted the emergency bridge loan documents to look deceptively standard on the first 5 pages. However, the penalty clauses are buried incredibly deep within the compliance addendums on page 47, specifically designed to trigger an immediate, inescapable default if a mandatory third-day audit is missed. Given Connor's well-documented arrogance, his overwhelming desperation, and his consistent tendency to completely ignore fine print in favor of playing the charismatic alpha male, it is a flawless legal trap. He will sign away his entire existence without ever knowing my name is on the master deed. I authorize the Apex Capital operational protocols with a single decisive signature, my pen gliding smoothly over the heavy parchment. The real absolute victory is never won by shouting insults in crowded charity ballrooms or throwing pathetic tantrums in public spaces. True power is executed in the quiet, absolute certainty of a legally binding contract. I hand the folder back to David. Initiate the sequence the moment Marcus is publicly escorted from his building. I want Connor suffocating on his own leveraged debt by Friday. Before David leaves, he hands me a secondary manila envelope. There is one more pressing matter, Miss Sienna. The executive board of your father's prestigious law firm, which currently occupies the top 3 floors of the downtown commercial building you acquired last week, has formally rejected the revised lease agreement. They submitted a highly aggressive legal complaint regarding the massive rent increase. Your father personally signed the document, threatening to tie our property management division up in years of frivolous litigation, claiming the adjustment is completely malicious and financially unjustified. Oh yes. I slowly open the envelope, reading the arrogant, demanding language my father used to draft the complaint. He is still operating under the grand illusion that he holds the superior position, completely unaware that the landlord he is aggressively threatening is the very daughter he spent decades severely underestimating. I do not feel a shred of intimidation. I feel a cold, calculating sense of absolute anticipation. Cancel my afternoon meetings, I command, smoothly grabbing my designer coat from the silver stand. I am going to handle this specific tenant dispute personally. 30 minutes later, my chauffeur pulls the sleek black Maybach up to the towering glass and steel commercial high-rise. This building was the epicenter of my father's superficial professional world, the grand stage where he paraded his unearned privilege and demanded absolute respect from his peers. I bypassed the main lobby reception, utilizing my master ownership keycard to summon the private executive elevator. I ascend to the penthouse level, stepping out onto the plush, thick carpet of the premier law firm that bears his prestigious name. The senior receptionist, a stern woman who has worked for my father for 20 years, immediately stands up, her eyes narrowing as she recognizes me. Sienna, what on earth are you doing here? This floor is strictly for corporate clients and senior partners. Your father is currently in a highly sensitive board meeting. You absolutely cannot interrupt him. I do not stop walking. I glide past her desk with perfect unbothered posture, the sharp click of my designer heels echoing loudly against the polished hardwood floors of the corridor. I am not here to see my father as a daughter, I state coldly, pushing open the heavy frosted glass doors of the primary executive boardroom without knocking. The massive room falls completely silent. 12 senior partners, all wealthy aging men in expensive suits, turn their heads in absolute shock. My father sits proudly at the head of the long mahogany table, mid-sentence, his hand frozen in the air. His face rapidly flushes with a mixture of intense embarrassment and boiling anger. He slams his hand down onto the table, rattling the crystal water glasses. Sienna, what is the meaning of this outrageous intrusion? My father barks aggressively, attempting to assert his dominance in front of his elite colleagues. You have completely lost your mind breaking into a secure corporate facility. Security will escort you out immediately. I told you at the engagement dinner that I have zero tolerance for your pathetic stunts. I walk deliberately toward the opposite end of the long table, standing tall and entirely unfazed by his booming voice. I reach into my designer handbag, pulling out the thick commercial property deed and the formal eviction notices I had my legal team draft during the car ride over. I toss the heavy documents onto the center of the polished wood, the loud thud echoing sharply in the tense silence. I am not throwing a stunt, Richard, I say, deliberately stripping him of his parental title and addressing him with cold professional detachment. I am here responding directly to the aggressive legal complaint your firm submitted to Horizon Group this morning regarding the revised commercial lease agreements. One of the senior partners, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, frowns in deep confusion. Horizon Group? That is the massive Seattle conglomerate that just bought this entire city block. What does a junior design assistant have to do with the premier holding company? I offer the room a chilling, predatory smile. I am the founder and sole majority shareholder of Horizon Group. I own this entire skyscraper. I own the parking garage beneath it, the luxury restaurant on the ground floor, and every single inch of the mahogany paneling currently surrounding you. Which means, gentlemen, I am your new landlord, and I am entirely unimpressed by your pathetic attempts to intimidate my property management division with frivolous legal threats. The color rapidly drains from my father's arrogant face, leaving him looking sickly and incredibly old under the bright fluorescent lights. His jaw hangs open, his brain violently misfiring as he desperately attempts to reconcile the quiet, submissive daughter he emotionally abused with the ruthless corporate titan standing triumphantly before him. He looks frantically at the property deed resting on the table, recognizing the undeniable authorized legal seals stamped across the pages. This is legally impossible, my father stammers weakly, his previous booming authority completely shattered. You cannot possibly possess the massive capital required to purchase a 50-story commercial high-rise. You are lying. This is some kind of fraudulent trick. The only fraud in this room is the outdated business model your failing firm is currently operating on, I reply ruthlessly, stepping forward and placing both hands firmly on the edge of the table. I ran a comprehensive audit on your corporate financials before I acquired this building. Your prestigious firm has been bleeding massive amounts of capital for 3 consecutive years. You are losing top-tier clients to younger, more aggressive agencies. You desperately rely on this premium office location to project a false illusion of ongoing success and elite status. You cannot afford the current market rates, and you certainly cannot afford the massive relocation costs associated with moving your entire operation to a cheaper low-income district. The other senior partners begin shifting uncomfortably in their expensive leather chairs, exchanging terrified, panicked glances. They realize instantly that I am not acting out of blind emotional revenge. I am executing a calculated, surgically precise corporate dismantling. I have effectively cornered them. The revised lease agreement I sent you is strictly tied to current highly competitive market rates. I continue, my voice echoing with lethal authority. It is completely legal and absolutely non-negotiable. You have two highly specific options today. You can either sign the updated lease agreement right now, immediately transferring the massive security deposit to my holding accounts, or you can begin packing your expensive law books into cardboard boxes. Because if that contract is not signed by 5 o'clock this evening, I will personally instruct my commercial eviction teams to physically remove your desks, sever your internet servers, and padlock these heavy glass doors by dawn. You would actually evict your own father, he whispers, his voice trembling with a mixture of profound shock and deep, unadulterated terror. He attempts to play the emotional card, desperately searching for a shred of the familial loyalty he spent decades systematically destroying. You taught me from a very young age that this family operates strictly on a transactional basis, I remind him coldly. You told me at the engagement dinner that I contributed absolutely nothing to this family's prestigious legacy. You demanded I pay a massive tax for my mere existence. Well, Richard, I am simply collecting my tax today. This is strictly business, nothing more. The silence in the boardroom is absolutely suffocating. The elite lawyers' men who make millions of dollars aggressively arguing in federal courtrooms are completely paralyzed by the undeniable reality of my absolute financial supremacy. My father looks down at his trembling hands, the immense crushing weight of his monumental mistakes finally breaking his spirit. He spent his entire life valuing wealth status and ruthless corporate power above human decency. Now, he is being completely destroyed by the very same metrics he worshipped. Without waiting for his pathetic surrender, I turn my back on the stunned executives and walk gracefully toward the exit. 5 o'clock, gentlemen, I declare loudly over my shoulder. Do not be late. Horizon Group charges exorbitant late fees. I step back into the private elevator, feeling a massive, intoxicating wave of pure adrenaline and absolute liberation wash over my entire being. The suffocating ghost of my childhood trauma, the haunting memory of my father's cold indifference completely evaporates in the warm glow of my undeniable victory. I did not just defeat him, I proved on his own highly competitive battlefield that I am the vastly superior intellect. Returning to my luxury Maybach, I instruct the driver to take me back to my corporate headquarters. As I watch the vibrant city blur past the tinted windows, my phone vibrates with a secure message from David. The federal authorities have officially finalized the warrants for Marcus. The timeline is perfectly set. My father is currently scrambling to save his dying firm entirely neutralized and unable to offer Marcus or Connor any financial protection or legal sanctuary. The protective walls of their arrogant, toxic ecosystem have been systematically demolished, leaving them completely exposed to the impending storm. The board is perfectly set. The traps are fully armed, and I am sitting comfortably on the throne, ready to watch the rest of their pathetic empire burn to absolute ashes. My phone vibrates on the mahogany desk, pulling me from my triumphant thoughts. It is my lead receptionist downstairs. Miss Sienna, there is a frantic woman in the lobby demanding to see you. She claims she is your older sister, Victoria. Security is prepared to escort her out. I smile a slow, cold curve of my lips. Send her up, I reply smoothly, and hold all my calls. 5 minutes later, the heavy glass doors of my executive office swing open. Victoria storms in, but she looks absolutely nothing like the arrogant, smirking woman who demanded I pay her $6,000 engagement dinner bill just a few days ago. Her designer hair is disheveled, her makeup is slightly smudged, and her breathing is shallow and erratic. The news of our father's prestigious law firm being formally evicted and financially dismantled has clearly hit the family group chat. "What did you do?" Victoria screams, her voice echoing shrilly in my spacious office. She marches toward my desk, planting her hands on the polished wood. "My fiancé Preston just called off our entire wedding. His wealth management firm ran a background check on our father's company after the eviction notice went public. They realized our family is drowning in debt. He left me Sienna. He packed his bags and left because he refuses to marry into a bankrupt family. Tell me this is a sick joke. Tell me you did not actually destroy Dad's firm." I lean back in my leather chair, steepling my fingers together, completely unaffected by her hysterical meltdown. "I did not destroy his firm, Victoria," I state calmly. "I simply adjusted the rent to fair market value. It is not my fault our father has been running a failing business for 3 years and relying on a cheap lease to project a fake illusion of wealth." "You ruined my life," she wails, tears of genuine panic streaming down her face. "I was supposed to be a senior executive. I was supposed to have a lavish wedding in Italy. How could you do this to your own flesh and blood after everything we did for you?" "Everything you did for me." I stand up slowly, the velvet edge in my voice making her take a sudden step backward. "You mean like the time you snatched my college acceptance letter to a top-tier architecture program and threw it into the burning fireplace? You mean like the decades you spent calling me a useless disappointment, treating me like a pathetic servant in my own home? You built your entire superiority complex on the false assumption that I was beneath you." I walk around the desk, stopping just inches from her trembling form. "You demanded I pay for your engagement dinner as a tax for my existence. Well, Victoria, consider your cancelled wedding and your vanished executive title my official refund. Your golden child status was funded by an illusion, and the illusion is officially bankrupt. Now get out of my building before I have security throw you onto the pavement." Victoria opens her mouth to scream another insult, but the absolute crushing reality of my power finally silences her. She looks around the massive multi-million-dollar office, realizing the sister she relentlessly bullied is now an untouchable titan. She turns around her shoulders, completely slumped, and walks out the door weeping pathetically. The golden child has finally fallen, and the satisfying thud of the door closing behind her is the greatest wedding gift I could have ever given her. The collapse of my father's firm did not just ruin Victoria's wedding, it sent a catastrophic shockwave through my mother's carefully curated social universe. For decades, Elaine had ruled the Fairfield Country Club with an iron fist, using our family's perceived wealth to brutally judge and exclude anyone she deemed inferior. Her entire identity was woven into her expensive pearl necklaces, her weekly charity luncheons, and the arrogant superiority she wielded like a weapon. But in the ruthless world of high society, loyalty is directly tied to a bank balance. Once the news of my father's massive commercial eviction and impending bankruptcy leaked to the country club board, Elaine was instantly transformed from a queen into a social pariah. 2 weeks after the boardroom confrontation, my private elevator chimes, signaling an unscheduled arrival at my penthouse. I am sitting on my velvet sofa reviewing international expansion plans when my mother steps into my living room. She looks completely shattered. The arrogant smirk she wore at the engagement dinner is gone, replaced by the terrified, frantic energy of a drowning woman. She is wearing a Chanel suit from 3 seasons ago, and her hands are trembling so violently she can barely hold her designer clutch. "Sienna?" she gasps, her voice breaking as she looks around the breathtaking expanse of my penthouse, taking in the panoramic views of the city she used to claim I was banished to. "Please, I had to bribe your building concierge just to get up here. You have to stop this. Your father is having a nervous breakdown. We are losing the Colonial House in Fairfield. The bank has already initiated foreclosure proceedings. My credit cards are completely frozen, and the country club just formally revoked my membership due to unpaid dues." I slowly set my tablet onto the glass coffee table, crossing my legs elegantly. I do not offer her a drink. I do not offer her a seat. I am struggling to see how your financial mismanagement is my problem, Elaine. I reply, my voice dripping with absolute apathy. She flinches at the use of her first name, tears finally spilling over her mascara. I am your mother. You have millions of dollars, Sienna. You own skyscrapers. You could write a single check right now and save our family home. You could pay my country club dues. You could fix all of this. We are family. Family. I echo, letting out a soft, freezing laugh. You were not family when you painted my childhood bedroom pale blue just to assert your absolute dominance over my preferences, teaching me that my voice did not matter in my own home. You were not family when you sat at that engagement dinner smirking behind your champagne glass, explicitly telling me how lucky I was to be invited. You made a classist, racially charged jab about me returning to my low-income roots, utterly convinced I was a pathetic failure. You demanded I pay a $6,000 dinner bill to punish me for my existence. Kya? My mother drops to her knees on my plush Persian rug, weeping uncontrollably. I was wrong. I was so wrong, Sienna. I am begging you. I will apologize publicly. I will do whatever you want. Please do not let me become poor. I do not know how to survive without my status. I stand up gracefully, looking down at the woman who spent 35 years ensuring I felt cold, unloved, and entirely worthless. You will survive the exact same way you expected me to survive, when you all constantly tried to break my spirit, I state coldly. You will pack up your expensive pearls, you will move into a small apartment, and you will finally experience the agonizing reality of the lower-class life you spent decades mocking. The Fairfield house belongs to the bank now. Do not ever bypass my security again, Elaine. This is the last time we will ever speak. I signal my private security team, who immediately step out of the shadows, gently but firmly lifting my hysterical mother from the floor and escorting her out of my magnificent life forever. The morning sun breaks over the Atlanta skyline, casting long golden shadows across the sleek glass exterior of the prestigious financial firm, where Marcus serves as chief financial officer. While my former husband is undoubtedly spending his early hours desperately attempting to salvage his rapidly fracturing alliance with Connor, my elite team of corporate investigators has already executed the final devastating phase of my carefully orchestrated plan. At precisely 8 o'clock, a thick, unmarked leather binder is delivered directly to the heavily guarded mahogany desk of the company's chief executive officer. There is no return address, no identifying signature, and absolutely no warning. Inside that pristine binder lies a comprehensive, undeniably damning forensic accounting report that my team spent the last 3 weeks meticulously compiling. The CEO opens the first page, his initial curiosity rapidly transforming into profound, suffocating horror. The meticulously curated document details the exact timestamps, hidden offshore routing numbers, and deeply buried shell corporations Marcus utilized to systematically siphon massive amounts of company funds over the past 2 years. Every single stolen dollar is flawlessly traced and explicitly linked to his personal indulgences. The report contains undeniably clear evidence showing stolen corporate assets funding his lavish overseas vacations with Vanessa, purchasing her expensive diamond jewelry, and covering the exorbitant monthly leases on luxury sports cars he claimed were company perks. More devastatingly, the final section of the report provides irrefutable proof that Marcus illegally wired a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate asset transfer to serve as the initial down payment for Connor's highly promoted commercial real estate venture. Marcus arrives at the towering office building at 9 o'clock, blissfully unaware of the catastrophic storm currently raging within the executive suite. He strides confidently through the marble lobby, carrying his expensive leather briefcase and wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit purchased with stolen money. He flashes an arrogant, practiced smile at the receptionist, fully expecting another day of commanding respect and wielding unearned power. He approaches the secure executive elevator, reaching into his pocket to retrieve his platinum access badge. He swipes the card against the glowing digital reader, anticipating the familiar soft chime of authorization. Instead, the machine emits a harsh, loud red error tone. He frowns in mild annoyance, aggressively swiping the badge a second time, completely convinced it is simply a minor technical glitch that the IT department will need to immediately resolve. Before he can demand assistance from the front desk, heavy footsteps echo sharply across the polished marble floor. Two towering, large corporate security officers approach him from behind, their expressions entirely devoid of any emotion. They do not offer polite morning greetings. The lead officer places a firm, unyielding hand directly onto Marcus's shoulder, physically turning him away from the elevator banks. Marcus bristles with immediate, intense indignation, loudly demanding to know the meaning of this blatant disrespect. He threatens to have both men fired before lunch, aggressively citing his senior executive status and boasting about his close personal friendship with the board of directors. The security officers remain completely silent, maintaining an iron grip on his expensive suit jacket as they forcefully guide him toward a small, windowless interrogation room located far away from the main public lobby. Inside the stark, brightly lit room, the chief executive officer is already waiting, standing rigidly beside the company's lead legal counsel. The thick leather binder rests open on the metal table between them. Marcus demands an explanation, his voice rising in panic as he finally registers the severe, uncompromising fury radiating from his boss. The CEO does not yell. He speaks in a cold, deadly whisper that entirely strips Marcus of his remaining bravado. He points a trembling finger at the forensic report, explicitly listing the exact routing numbers and the massive illegal transfers made directly to Connor's fraudulent real estate holding company. Marcus opens his mouth to formulate a lie, to blame a junior accountant, or claim a massive clerical error, but the sheer volume of irrefutable evidence completely paralyzes his tongue. The paper trail is absolute perfection. The legal counsel steps forward, handing Marcus a single sheet of paper. It is a formal immediate termination notice, effectively firing him for cause and stripping him of all accumulated stock options, severance packages, and executive benefits. The lawyer coldly informs Marcus that the firm's private auditors spent the entire night verifying the anonymous dossier and confirming the massive financial discrepancies. Furthermore, the company has already forwarded the complete, unedited forensic report directly to the federal authorities. The lawyer explicitly states that a pending federal indictment for grand larceny, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement is currently being drafted by the prosecutor's office. Marcus physically collapses into a cheap plastic chair, the blood draining entirely from his arrogant face as the absolute reality of his total destruction finally sets in. He realizes he is facing decades in federal prison. The officers confiscate his company smartphone, corporate credit cards, and the keys to his leased vehicle. They do not allow him to return to his corner office or say goodbye to his staff. They grasp his arms firmly, marching him out the back service exit. He is shoved onto the cold concrete of the rear loading dock, his briefcase tossed onto the pavement beside him. The heavy metal door slams shut, permanently sealing him out of the corporate world he believed he ruled. The news of Marcus being escorted out of his corporate building by security spreads through the elite financial sector of Atlanta with the terrifying speed of a raging wildfire. By 10 o'clock in the morning, my private terminal is flooded with breaking alerts from industry insiders and local business journals. They are all reporting the exact same catastrophic headline regarding the massive embezzlement scandal. Marcus was a highly respected executive, a man who built his entire reputation on the illusion of impeccable financial stability and supreme intelligence. Now that carefully constructed facade is completely shattered into microscopic, unrecoverable, pathetic pieces. The immediate fallout from his sudden arrest is absolutely spectacular to witness. Marcus was not merely an employee, he was a heavily entrenched financial guarantor for numerous massive commercial projects across the city. His signature was the primary pillar holding up an incredible amount of leveraged debt. The most significant of these projects is Connor's highly publicized $20 million real estate venture. I sit comfortably at my mahogany desk, taking a slow sip of my dark espresso, watching the digital dominoes begin to fall. The primary lending bank backing Connor's massive project reacts to the scandal with brutal efficiency. Banks inherently despise risk, and federal embezzlement charges represent the ultimate financial plague. Less than 2 hours after Marcus is officially fired for cause, the primary lending institution formally pulls all remaining funding for Connor's commercial development. They legally freeze the active credit lines and issue an immediate stop work order to all construction crews currently operating on the downtown site. The massive cranes and heavy machinery grind to a complete, deafening halt. Connor receives the devastating notification while he is sitting in what remains of his crumbling brokerage firm. The contagion effect of Marcus's massive fraud has officially landed. Connor is suddenly facing a catastrophic margin call that threatens to completely obliterate his entire existence. In his blind, arrogant pursuit of ultimate wealth and elite social status, he had heavily overextended his personal boundaries. To secure the initial bridge financing for the massive commercial deal, Connor aggressively leveraged every single tangible asset he could possibly control. He secretly took out a massive second mortgage on his sprawling suburban mansion. He foolishly leveraged the operational capital of his prestigious brokerage firm, draining the accounts dry. He even legally tied the massive commercial debt directly to Keisha's struggling boutique business today. Keisha had absolutely no idea that her arrogant husband had used her remaining business assets as collateral for his high-risk development scheme. She believed Connor was a brilliant, untouchable titan of industry who would elevate their family to unimaginable heights of luxury. Now her boutique, which was already facing a severe corporate eviction from my property management division, is completely anchored to a sinking $20 million stone. If the primary bank demands immediate repayment of the deployed capital, Keisha will be held personally liable for millions of dollars she does not actually possess right now this very morning. My lead assistant knocks gently on my office door, handing me a freshly printed intelligence report. The documents detail the exact severity of Connor's current predicament. The bank has officially issued a terrifying ultimatum to his holding company. He has exactly 72 hours to find replacement capital for the revoked $20 million loan. If he fails to secure a new primary guarantor by Friday afternoon, the bank will immediately begin seizing all leveraged collateral. They will foreclose on his beautiful mansion, liquidate his brokerage accounts, and strip Keisha's boutique of every single remaining piece of valuable designer inventory. 72 hours is an absolute eternity when you are trapped in a nightmare, but it is a fleeting second when you are desperately begging for millions of dollars. Connor attempts to leverage his elite country club connections, frantically calling every wealthy investor he arrogantly boasted to just a few days prior. However, the social smear campaign he previously launched against me has completely backfired. The wealthy elites now view him as a toxic liability, closely associated with a disgraced, federally indicted criminal. No respectable financial institution or private equity firm will ever touch his radioactive project right now today. Driven by his wife's hysterical demands and his own suffocating terror of losing his elite status, Connor embarks on a desperate, frantic scramble to secure replacement capital. By Monday morning, his situation transitions from critical to apocalyptic. Traditional banking institutions refuse to even schedule a preliminary meeting with him, instantly flagging his professional profile due to his close association with a known federal embezzler. The white shoe investors from New York permanently sever all communication, dissolving their preliminary agreements. Connor sits alone in his empty, echoing office, sweating profusely through his wrinkled shirt as he stares at the terrifying financial statements. The massive margin call on his leveraged assets is officially due in less than 48 hours. If he cannot produce the required millions, the primary lending bank will ruthlessly foreclose on his residence, seize his remaining brokerage accounts, and force him into immediate, humiliating bankruptcy. In his blind desperation, Connor bypasses every established ethical protocol and begins exploring the darkest corners of the unregulated financial sector. He reaches out to a series of aggressive alternative lending networks, begging for a temporary bridge loan to save his heavily leveraged assets. Late Tuesday afternoon, he finally receives a response from a shadowy private equity firm, officially registered to a generic post office box in Delaware. The firm, operating under the ambiguous name Apex Capital Solutions specializes in predatory lending practices, specifically targeting desperate corporate entities facing imminent collapse. They do not require extensive background checks, federal compliance audits, or traditional character references. They offer Connor the financial lifeline he desperately requires to satisfy the impending margin call and keep his business afloat. However, the associated terms of this emergency capital injection are absolutely brutal. The predatory firm demands a devastating interest rate that practically guarantees long-term financial ruin. More importantly, they require ironclad, inescapable collateral to secure the high-risk transaction. Connor must legally pledge his brokerage firm, his residential estate, his wife's liquid assets, and future anticipated earnings directly to the Delaware entity. He essentially has to sign away the complete totality of his entire existence. A rational, competent financial professional would instantly recognize the catastrophic danger of engaging with such a ruthless, unregulated organization. The punishing contract is deliberately designed to strip the borrower of all legal protections, allowing the lending firm to aggressively seize all pledged assets the very second a single payment is missed. But Connor is no longer a rational professional. He is a terrified, arrogant man drowning in the chaotic consequences of his own monumental greed. Blinded by his overwhelming desperation and his stubborn, arrogant belief that he can somehow outsmart the system once the immediate crisis passes, Connor makes the ultimate fatal mistake. He genuinely convinces himself that he only needs this predatory loan for a few short months until he can secure a legitimate investor to refinance the crippling debt. He aggressively ignores the explicit warnings hidden deep within the dense legal jargon of the contract. He does not bother consulting a secondary legal advisor or reading the terrifying penalty clauses detailed on the final pages. Sitting alone in the dark shadows of his failing office, Connor picks up a heavy silver pen and hurriedly signs his signature across the dotted line, officially sealing his tragic fate. He emails the executed documents back to the Delaware firm, letting out a massive shuddering breath of temporary relief as the capital transfer is initiated. He truly believes he has successfully survived the catastrophic storm and secured his glorious future. He assumes he has outmaneuvered his enemies and protected his coveted social standing from absolute destruction. He plans to use this newly acquired capital to crush his competitors and rebuild his empire. He has absolutely no idea that Apex Capital Solutions is simply another obscure corporate subsidiary entirely owned and secretly operated by my holding company. By signing those predatory, inescapable financial documents, Connor did not save his life. He legally and permanently handed the complete ownership of his entire future directly to me. While Connor blindly signs his life away across town, the cramped luxury rental feels smaller each minute as the impending federal prosecution settles heavily over the space. Marcus sits at the small glass dining table surrounded by towering stacks of legal documents and terrifying bank statements showing negative balances. His once immaculate custom-tailored suit is replaced by wrinkled sweatpants, his arrogant demeanor completely crushed under the overwhelming weight of mounting attorney fees he cannot possibly afford to pay. He rubs his bloodshot eyes, desperately scrolling through his phone contacts in a futile search for anyone willing to offer a lifeline. Every single former colleague, country club associate, and wealthy friend has entirely blocked his number, treating him like a highly contagious disease. In the adjacent bedroom, Vanessa watches him through the cracked door with a mixture of absolute disgust and calculating survival instinct. The glamorous future she originally envisioned, filled with sprawling mansions, private jets, and limitless credit cards, has violently evaporated into a suffocating nightmare of criminal investigations and frozen assets. She realizes with crystal clarity that the man sitting in the other room is no longer a powerful corporate titan, but a sinking anchor destined for a concrete cell. Moving with absolute silence, she pulls her expensive designer suitcases from the top shelf of the cramped closet. She meticulously folds her silk dresses and expensive shoes, the very items Marcus purchased using embezzled corporate funds before his spectacular downfall. Her packing is methodical, stripped of any lingering emotional attachment. When her bags are fully loaded, she turns her attention to the small leather valet tray resting on the nightstand. 3 authentic designer watches remain untouched by the federal authorities, a hidden stash Marcus desperately planned to pawn to cover his initial legal retainer. Vanessa scoops them up without a single ounce of hesitation, sliding the heavy diamond-encrusted timepieces deep into her leather purse. She simply considers it a modest severance package for wasting her youth on a man who turned out to be a massive financial illusion. Taking a deep breath, she smoothly lifts the handles of her rolling luggage, navigating quietly across the carpeted floor. Her singular goal is to slip out the front door undetected, to vanish completely into the bustling city streets before he even registers her permanent absence. She reaches the narrow hallway, her hand extending confidently toward the silver doorknob. "Where exactly do you think you are going?" Marcus demands, his harsh voice shattering the tense silence of the small apartment. He stands abruptly from the dining table, sending a stack of legal warnings scattering across the cheap linoleum floor. His eyes dart frantically from her packed designer luggage to the heavy winter coat draped over her arm. He steps aggressively into the hallway, physically blocking her path to freedom. The profound shock of her betrayal hits him with the force of a physical blow, temporarily rendering him speechless. He had genuinely believed that despite the catastrophic loss of his massive executive salary and their luxurious lifestyle, she would remain fiercely loyal to him. He reaches out desperately, attempting to grab her arm, pleading with her to unpack her bags and stay. He promises her that his elite legal team will somehow find a miraculous loophole, swearing that he just needs a few more weeks to secure emergency funding to fix this massive misunderstanding. He frantically tells her they are still a unified team, that they absolutely must stand together against the aggressive federal prosecutors trying to permanently destroy their beautiful life. Vanessa violently rips her arm out of his desperate grasp, her eyes blazing with absolute contempt. She does not cower or offer a gentle apology. Instead, she unleashes the brutal, unvarnished truth, verbally obliterating the fragile remnants of his masculine pride. "We do not have a beautiful life, Marcus," she screams, her voice dripping with sheer venom. "You are an absolute fraud. You lied to me about your wealth, your power, and your so-called brilliant career. You told me Sienna was just a pathetic trophy wife, a useless accessory you proudly funded. But she owned the mansion. She owned your entire existence. You were nothing but a glorified tenant playing dress-up with her money." Marcus shrinks backward, his face flushing crimson as her harsh words tear through his delusions. She relentlessly mocks his frozen bank accounts and his suspended corporate title, explicitly calling him a broke, foolish criminal who ruined her prime years. She laughs coldly at his pathetic promises of emergency funding, pointing out that his own arrogant family has completely abandoned him to save their own crumbling reputations. She loudly declares that she absolutely refuses to spend the best years of her vibrant life visiting a disgraced, penniless embezzler in a maximum security federal penitentiary. Before Marcus can muster a pathetic defense, he notices the unnatural bulge in her expensive leather purse. He lunges forward forcefully, grabbing the designer bag from her shoulder. The stolen watches spill onto the floor, clattering loudly against the wood. "You are stealing from me," he gasps, staring at the watches he desperately needed for survival. Vanessa simply steps over them, entirely unbothered by her exposure. "Consider it payment for the massive lie you sold me," she states, coldly adjusting her coat with perfectly manicured hands. She pushes past his trembling form, forcefully yanking the front door open. The chilly hallway air rushes into the claustrophobic apartment. Marcus begs her one final time, tears of genuine panic streaming down his pale cheeks as the undeniable reality of isolation sets in. She completely ignores his pathetic sobbing. She marches down the corridor, the rhythmic clicking of her luggage wheels echoing like a definitive final judgment. The heavy door slams shut, sealing Marcus inside his personal prison. He slowly drops to his knees among the scattered legal warnings on the floor, feeling completely broken, entirely isolated, and utterly terrified as he helplessly waits alone for the ruthless federal prosecutors to finally arrive. Exactly 72 hours pass before the meticulously crafted trap violently snaps shut. The predatory loan contract Connor so eagerly signed contained a highly specific, deliberately buried compliance clause. It required him to submit a comprehensive, independently audited financial disclosure of his brokerage firm by the third business day. Driven entirely by his suffocating arrogance and a desperate need to maintain appearances at his country club, he completely ignored the dense legal addendums. He simply assumed standard grace periods applied to his situation. He was spectacularly wrong. At exactly 9 o'clock on Friday morning, the automated legal system of Apex Capital Solutions detects the missed deadline. The firm immediately triggers the default protocol. A formal notice of breach is instantly dispatched directly to his private email, accompanied by a terrifyingly blunt physical courier delivering the identical documents to his temporary office space. Connor is sitting behind a rented desk sipping a cheap coffee when he opens the thick manila envelope. The legal jargon is razor-sharp and leaves absolutely no room for interpretation. Due to the missed compliance deadline, the Delaware private equity firm is officially calling an emergency restructuring meeting for that very afternoon. The letter explicitly outlines the immediate consequences of his default. Apex Capital Solutions is legally initiating the aggressive seizure of all pledged collateral. This includes his commercial brokerage accounts, the remaining liquid assets belonging to his wife, and the sprawling suburban mansion he desperately leveraged to secure the toxic loan. The color drains completely from his face as the sheer, unadulterated terror finally pierces his thick armor of entitlement. He realizes with sickening clarity that he is about to lose every single tangible marker of his elite social standing before sunset. Panic consumes his entire being, but his massive ego absolutely refuses to accept total defeat. He frantically grabs his smartphone, dialing the number for the Delaware firm, demanding to speak directly with a managing partner. A cold, polite receptionist informs him that the restructuring meeting is mandatory and non-negotiable. She provides an address for a prestigious law office located in the absolute center of the downtown financial district, instructing him to arrive promptly at 3 o'clock. Connor attempts to project false authority, barking threats into the phone about his vast network of influential judges and politicians. The receptionist simply hangs up the line, leaving him shouting empty promises into the silent room. He realizes he cannot face this catastrophic disaster alone. He needs human shields to absorb the impending collateral damage and validate his fading sense of superiority. He furiously dials Keisha, ordering her to leave her padlocked boutique and meet him immediately. He then calls Marcus, who is currently hiding from federal prosecutors in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. Connor forcefully commands his disgraced brother-in-law to put on his last clean suit and attend the emergency meeting. When they gather in the lobby of the imposing glass high-rise later that afternoon, the tension between them is incredibly toxic. Marcus looks physically ill, his eyes darting nervously around the polished marble foyer, terrified that federal agents might suddenly appear to arrest him. Keisha is practically hyperventilating, her perfectly manicured hands shaking violently as she clutches a designer handbag she can no longer afford. She tearfully begs her husband to explain why a shadowy holding company is threatening to take away her beautiful home and her children's future. Connor fiercely shushes his hysterical wife aggressively, adjusting the silk tie around his neck. He puffs out his chest, desperately attempting to summon the arrogant alpha male persona that has defined his entire pathetic existence. He looks at his terrified family and delivers a speech dripping with profound delusional confidence. He assures them that this emergency restructuring meeting is nothing more than a standard corporate intimidation tactic designed to test his resolve. He loudly boasts that he has spent his entire lucrative career dominating high-stakes negotiations with aggressive venture capitalists. He promises them that he can easily talk his way out of this temporary setback by negotiating man-to-man with the elite white executives running the Delaware firm. He claims they simply speak the same language of wealth and power, completely convinced that a few shared golfing anecdotes and a firm handshake will miraculously erase millions of dollars in defaulted debt. Keisha desperately wants to believe his confident lies, nodding weakly as she wipes away her tears. Marcus remains entirely silent, his previous corporate arrogance completely crushed under the weight of his own impending federal indictment. He simply follows Connor toward the private elevators like a condemned prisoner marching toward the gallows. They ride up to the 50th floor in suffocating silence, the air pressure popping in their ears as they ascend to the highest level of the prestigious building. The elevator doors glide open smoothly, revealing an opulent reception area, dominated by dark mahogany wood and expansive panoramic windows. A stoic legal assistant silently guides the trembling trio down a long, quiet corridor toward the primary executive boardroom. Connor walks slightly ahead of the others, deliberately rolling his shoulders and lifting his chin, actively preparing to dominate the room with his aggressive charm. He firmly grasps the heavy brass handles of the double doors, pushing them open with a theatrical flourish designed to project absolute control. He strides confidently into the massive boardroom, opening his mouth to deliver a booming, charismatic greeting to the unseen executives waiting inside. However, the arrogant words instantly die in his throat, completely suffocating under the crushing weight of undeniable reality. The lavish room does not contain a team of elite, sympathetic men ready to offer him a generous extension. The expansive leather chairs surrounding the long oak table are entirely empty. There is only one person waiting for them inside the boardroom. The doors click shut heavily behind the stunned group, securely locking them inside the silent, perfectly designed trap. Connor stops breathing, his eyes wide with paralyzing horror as he stares across the polished wood, his fabricated empire collapsing. The heavy click of the lock seals them inside the sleek, intimidating glass boardroom. Connor exhales sharply, the paralyzing horror momentarily receding when he realizes the single figure seated in the corner is merely a stoic legal assistant. The assistant does not speak. He simply points a polished pen toward three uncomfortable steel chairs positioned opposite the massive oak table, then stands and exits through a concealed side door. The room is a masterclass in psychological warfare. The walls are entirely constructed of soundproof glass, offering a dizzying, vertigo-inducing view of the sprawling financial district below, yet making them feel entirely exposed and vulnerable. There are no paintings, no warm colors, and absolutely no distractions. Just sharp angles, cold surfaces, and the crushing weight of their impending financial doom. Connor aggressively straightens his ruined silk tie and begins pacing the length of the long room, his expensive leather shoes squeaking loudly against the pristine marble floor. He cannot stand the suffocating silence. He begins muttering under his breath, frantically running through an endless loop of aggressive negotiation tactics and legal loopholes he hopes to exploit. He practices his alpha male posture, thrusting out his chest and attempting to project an aura of untouchable wealth that he no longer possesses. Marcus remains entirely motionless, sinking heavily into one of the cold steel chairs, like a man marching toward his own execution. He stares blankly at the polished wood grain of the table, his previous corporate arrogance completely replaced by the hollow, dead-eyed stare of a convicted felon. Connor stops pacing for a fraction of a second, directing his boiling, unadulterated rage entirely onto his disgraced brother-in-law. He violently points his trembling finger at Marcus, his voice echoing harshly against the unforgiving glass walls. He viciously blames Marcus for this entire catastrophic situation, screaming that his reckless embezzlement and pathetic infidelity dragged their prestigious family name into the gutter. Connor forcefully reminds Marcus that he was a highly respected commercial broker with a flawless industry reputation before he blindly trusted a fraudulent executive. He paces faster, his face flushing a dangerous shade of crimson, angrily detailing exactly how many millions of dollars he stands to lose because of Marcus's staggering incompetence. Marcus does not offer a single word of defense. He simply absorbs the vicious verbal assault, his shoulders slumping lower, as he silently accepts his role as the ultimate architect of their total destruction. Keisha sits rigidly in the chair next to her broken brother, clutching her expensive designer handbag tightly against her chest, as if it could physically protect her from bankruptcy. She is practically hyperventilating, her perfectly contoured makeup ruined by fresh panicked tears. She cries out that she cannot possibly lose her beautiful suburban mansion or face the absolute humiliation of pulling her gifted children out of their elite private academies. The sheer terror of returning to a life of mediocrity pushes her into a state of hysterical weeping. Connor abruptly stops pacing and leans over his sobbing wife, aggressively grabbing her shoulders. He forcefully commands her to stop acting like a pathetic victim, his massive ego desperately demanding absolute submission. He arrogantly assures Keisha that this Delaware private equity firm is run by pragmatic, wealthy men who understand the intricate mechanics of high-stakes business. He loudly boasts that his inherent social standing, his extensive network of elite industry connections, and his undeniable white privilege will ultimately save them from financial ruin. He genuinely believes that once the chief executive officer enters the room, they will speak the exclusive language of the boys' club, share a firm handshake, and miraculously restructure the toxic debt to his absolute advantage. The suffocating tension inside the glass boardroom becomes practically unbearable as the minutes painfully tick by. Connor resumes his frantic pacing, his arrogant reassurances ringing hollow even to his own ears. Every single second of waiting is a deliberate, agonizing psychological torture designed to completely break their resolve before the negotiation even begins. The digital clock on the wall flashes 3:15, then 3:30, and they remain entirely abandoned in the sterile space. The air conditioning hums quietly, maintaining a chilly temperature that forces Keisha to shiver uncontrollably in her thin designer dress. Marcus finally buries his face in his hands, letting out a pathetic, muted sob that perfectly underscores their collective desperation. Connor frantically checks his expensive gold watch, his frantic movements betraying the terrified, vulnerable boy hiding beneath his expensive Italian suit. He marches toward the heavy double doors, violently twisting the brass handles in a pathetic attempt to escape, but the mechanism remains securely locked from the outside. They are completely trapped, entirely powerless, and forced to sit in the chilling reality of their monumental mistakes, while the unseen executives intentionally let them stew in their own mounting terror. The afternoon sun begins its slow descent, casting long, menacing shadows across the polished oak table and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. Connor takes a deep, ragged breath, desperately trying to summon the last remaining shreds of his corporate bravado. He stands directly behind the steel chairs, positioning himself as the dominant patriarch, ready to aggressively defend his crumbling empire. Keisha holds her breath, wiping her tear-stained cheeks and attempting to arrange her face into a mask of dignified composure. Marcus does not move, his spirit already entirely broken by the inevitable consequences of his massive federal crimes. The absolute silence of the high-rise building is pierced by a sharp, rhythmic sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and undeniably powerful footsteps echo loudly down the long marble hallway, leading directly to their glass cage. The sharp clicking of expensive heels strikes the floor with predatory precision, each sound amplifying the suffocating dread threatening to completely consume them. The footsteps stop exactly outside the heavy double doors. The brass handle slowly begins to turn, the metallic click echoing like a gunshot in the dead silence. Final judgment is here. The heavy double doors swing open with a smooth, silent glide that betrays the heavy weight of the solid mahogany. Connor immediately jumps to his feet, adjusting his wrinkled suit jacket and slapping on a painfully fake smile, completely ready to charm the unseen executives. Keisha holds her breath, wiping a stray tear from her cheek, while Marcus remains slumped in his cold steel chair. Their collective anticipation shatters into a million jagged pieces when the first person to step across the threshold is not a wealthy, aging white male venture capitalist. It is me. I walk into the massive, echoing boardroom wearing a flawless, custom-tailored crimson suit that screams absolute authority and unimaginable wealth. I am flanked seamlessly by my two lead corporate attorneys, David and Sarah. both carrying thick leather binders containing the legal execution of Connor's monumental arrogance. The sheer shock on the faces of my former family is a masterpiece I could study for the rest of my life. Connor drops his hand, his fake smile instantly morphing into an ugly mask of profound, suffocating confusion. He actually steps backwards, stumbling slightly against the edge of the polished table, completely incapable of processing the reality. "What on earth are you doing here, Sienna?" Connor demands, his voice cracking with a pathetic mixture of outrage and rising panic. He aggressively looks past my shoulders, frantically scanning the empty hallway behind me for the real executives. "This is an extremely private restructuring meeting for Apex Capital Solutions. You have absolutely no right to be anywhere near this building. Security must have made a massive mistake letting you up here. Where is the chief executive officer? I demand to speak with the managing partners immediately before I call the police." I do not answer him right away. I walk with deliberate, measured steps toward the imposing head of the long oak table, fully claiming the seat of ultimate power. David and Sarah take their places on either side of me, placing the heavy legal binders onto the polished wood with a definitive, terrifying thud. I sit down gracefully, smoothing the fabric of my crimson blazer and fold my hands neatly in front of me. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to sit in the unbearable tension of the room. Marcus finally lifts his head, his hollow, defeated eyes locking onto mine. He sees the cold truth today. He recognizes the cold, calculating look on my face, the exact same expression I wore the night I packed his house into moving trucks. He realizes before the others do that there is no mistake. "There is absolutely no mistake, Connor," I say softly, my voice carrying a lethal velvet edge that easily cuts through the stifling air. "And you do not need to call security or demand to speak with any managing partners. You are currently looking directly at the sole chief executive officer of Apex Capital Solutions. My private wealth management trust secretly acquired the Delaware firm over a year ago to completely diversify my corporate holdings. I am the managing partner. I am the invisible executive you assumed you could easily charm with a firm handshake. And I am the person who owns every single piece of your pathetic leveraged life." Keisha lets out a blood-curdling, horrified gasp, physically recoiling in her chair as if she has been struck by lightning. She violently grabs her husband's arm, her fingernails digging deep into his expensive suit fabric. "Connor, tell me she is lying," Keisha begs hysterically, her voice echoing shrilly in the glass room. "This is pure panic. Tell me this ghetto hustler does not actually own our massive debt. You promised me you had this entirely under control. You swore to me that this predatory loan was just a temporary bridge." Connor is completely paralyzed, his jaw hanging open as his arrogant brain misfires, entirely unable to reconcile his deeply ingrained prejudice with the undeniable facts presented before him. "It is legally impossible," he stammers weakly. His eyes dart frantically toward my attorneys. "She is just a junior designer. She cannot possibly possess the massive capital required to fund a $20 million mezzanine loan. This is a ridiculous bluff. I demand to see the official corporate ownership documents right this second." David seamlessly slides the first heavy binder across the long table, the thick stack of papers stopping exactly in front of Connor's trembling hands. "The corporate ownership documents are fully detailed on page 1, Mr. Sterling," David states with icy professionalism. "As you can clearly see, Miss Sienna is the majority shareholder and sole beneficiary of the overarching trust. Furthermore, pages 10 through 50 contain the specific terms of the emergency capital injection you eagerly signed without proper legal review or any basic foresight whatsoever. You explicitly pledged your residential estate, your commercial brokerage, your wife's remaining liquid assets, and all future projected earnings directly to my client." Connor stares blankly at the ironclad legal documents, his face draining of all remaining color. The terrifying reality of his monumental stupidity finally crushes the last lingering remnants of his ego. He willfully ignored the dense legal addendums out of sheer desperation and toxic pride, blindly signing his entire existence over to a shadow corporation without verifying the ownership. He looks up at me, his eyes wide with inescapable terror. He realizes that I did not just defeat him, I completely obliterated his future. You planned this, Marcus whispers from his chair. I simply provided the rope, Marcus, I reply coldly. Connor enthusiastically tied the knot. You all spent years treating me like an inferior accessory, openly mocking my background. You genuinely believed your unearned privilege made you invincible. You missed the critical compliance deadline today, Connor. Therefore, I am officially executing the default protocol immediately. You will vacate your massive suburban mansion by tomorrow morning. You are completely finished. Enjoy the crushing poverty you claimed I belonged in. The suffocating silence in the boardroom stretches for an incredibly long moment before Connor finally shatters. The polished alpha male facade he wore like armor completely disintegrates right in front of me. His knees buckle under the sheer, unadulterated terror of the hopeless situation. He drops heavily onto the pristine marble floor, his expensive Italian suit pooling awkwardly around him. He does not just kneel, he physically collapses, crawling forward until his trembling hands grip the edge of the mahogany table. Tears stream down his flushed face, ruining his perfectly groomed appearance entirely. He begins to sob loud, heaving gasps that echo pathetically against the soundproof glass walls of my impenetrable corporate fortress. Keisha watches her husband grovel with wide, horrified eyes, her manicured hands flying up to cover her mouth in absolute shock. Marcus remains totally paralyzed in his cold steel chair, completely unable to process the sheer magnitude of this massive public humiliation. Connor looks up at me, his eyes red and frantic, completely stripped of the unearned arrogance he weaponized against me just a few short days ago. He begs desperately for his life, his voice cracking into a painfully high pitch as he pleads for a second chance he absolutely does not deserve from me ever. Please, Sienna, please, Connor cries, his voice echoing with absolute desperation, filling the room. You cannot do this to us. You cannot take my home away. Keisha is pregnant. He points a shaking finger toward his horrified wife, revealing a secret they had apparently been hiding from the entire world. We just found out last week. You cannot make a pregnant woman homeless. I will do whatever you want me to. I will restructure the payments. I will work for you for free. Just please show us some tiny shred of mercy. When I do not immediately respond, his desperation morphs into a vicious desire to survive. He abruptly turns his tear-stained face toward Marcus violently, throwing his disgraced brother-in-law entirely under the bus. It was all his fault, Connor screams, his voice dripping with venom as he attempts to save his own skin. Marcus lied to me about his financial stability. He dragged me into this massive mess. He told me to threaten you. He told me to use intimidation tactics to force you to drop the divorce settlement. I never wanted any part of this stupid feud. He is a criminal embezzler who ruined my pristine reputation. I sit perfectly still at the head of the massive table, watching his pathetic performance with absolute freezing indifference. I do not feel a single ounce of sympathy for the trembling man weeping on my floor. I slowly fold my hands together, letting his frantic sobbing fill the cold space. Mercy, I ask softly, my voice cutting through his hysterics like a razor blade. That is a fascinating request coming from you, Connor. Where exactly was your profound sense of mercy when you cornered me at the charity gala? He flinches, as if physically struck, his cries hitching in his throat. I lean forward slightly, locking my icy gaze with his panicked eyes. You did not offer me mercy when you viciously mocked my background. You stood in a crowded ballroom, puffed up your chest, and confidently called me a common ghetto hustler. You gleefully promised to use your elite white shoe investors to bury me so deeply I would never work in this city again. You arrogantly declared that I did not belong in your prestigious world. You specifically told me to pack my trash and enjoy my return to absolute poverty. Connor swallows hard, his face turning an awful shade of gray. I was angry, he stammers weakly, crawling backward slightly. I was just saying things to protect my family. I did not mean any of it. I offer him a chilling, humorless smile. I mean every single word I say, Connor, and my corporate contracts mean exactly what they explicitly state. He clasps his hands together in a desperate prayer, begging for a tiny extension just a few weeks to find replacement capital to satisfy the massive default. I look at David, my lead attorney, who immediately opens his heavy leather binder. He retrieves a thick stack of finalized legal paperwork. I take the documents and slide them smoothly across the polished oak table. They stop perfectly in front of Connor. The bold black ink across the top page outlines the immediate foreclosure of his sprawling suburban estate, the total liquidation of his commercial brokerage firm, and the complete seizure of Keisha's remaining liquid assets. There will be no extensions, I state firmly. Your accounts are frozen, your properties are mine, and your entire pathetic empire is officially liquidated as of this afternoon. Keisha lets out a long, agonizing wail, finally realizing the extravagant lifestyle she valued above her own human decency is permanently gone. She will have to raise her new baby in the very same low-income circumstances they all relentlessly mocked me for enduring for so many deeply painful years. Marcus simply stares blankly at the wall, completely hollowed out by the cascading destruction he initiated. Connor stares at the harsh legal documents resting before him, his tears dripping onto the crisp white paper, blurring the ink of his total ruin. He realizes his elite connections, his white privilege, and his aggressive intimidation tactics are completely useless against ironclad corporate law and my undeniable financial supremacy. He looks up at me one last time, his spirit entirely broken, silently, asking how I can be so utterly ruthless to my own blood. I stand up gracefully, buttoning my expensive crimson blazer, radiating absolute power and untouched tranquility. I look down at the three shattered people who spent years trying to break my mind and spirit. You wanted to play a high-stakes corporate game with a ghetto hustler, I say coldly. You simply lost. Pack your things, Connor. Business is business. Nothing more. Connor remains crumpled on the cold marble floor, his pathetic weeping echoing off the soundproof glass walls of the boardroom. I step gracefully around his trembling form, ignoring his desperate pleas for a mercy he never once extended to me. My focus shifts to the man sitting frozen in the steel chair at the opposite end of the long mahogany table. Marcus has not spoken since I revealed my absolute control over their shattered lives. His face is pale, his eyes hollow and bloodshot, devoid of the arrogant spark that once defined his personality. He is a hollow shell, drowning in the catastrophic consequences of his own monumental greed and infidelity. I walk deliberately toward him, my designer heels cutting through the tension. My lead attorney, David, anticipates my next move perfectly. He opens a secondary leather binder and extracts a thick stack of crisp legal documents bound by a heavy silver clip. I take the papers from his hands, feeling the profound weight of my ultimate liberation resting right in my palms. I stand directly in front of Marcus, looking down at his pathetic, trembling form with absolute clarity. I am no longer the obedient, submissive wife he believed he could discard. I am the architect of his total destruction. I place the heavy stack of documents onto the polished wood directly in front of his shaking hands. We have one final piece of business to conclude today, Marcus. I state, my voice carrying a quiet, dangerous authority that makes him flinch physically. These are the revised divorce settlement papers. My legal team spent the entire weekend updating the clauses to reflect our new reality. Marcus stares blankly at the black ink on the top page, his eyes darting frantically across the dense legal jargon. The terms outlined in this contract are absolute and non-negotiable. I explain loudly, ensuring that Keisha and Connor can hear every single brutal condition. By signing this document, you are formally waiving any and all rights to spousal support or alimony. You will immediately assume sole responsibility for the entirety of our remaining marital debt, including the outstanding balance on the luxury vehicles you leased for your mistress. Furthermore, you accept absolute liability for your own exorbitant legal fees stemming from your impending criminal trial. You get nothing from me, Marcus, not a single penny. Marcus lets out a choked gasp, his hands flying to his face as the sheer brutality of the terms crashes down upon his fractured reality. You cannot do this, Sienna, he begs, his voice cracking into a desperate pitch. I am already facing federal prison time. I have no income, no assets, and my bank accounts are frozen. If I take on all the marital debt and my own legal fees, I will be utterly ruined for the rest of my life. I will never recover from this financial hole. Please, I am begging you, just let me walk away with a clean slate. I offer him a cold, humorless smile, leaning forward so he can see the absolute lack of pity in my eyes. A clean slate is a privilege reserved for honest people, Marcus, I whisper. You spent years lying to me, manipulating me, and funding a secret life using stolen corporate funds. You dragged my pristine reputation into the gutter to protect your fragile ego. You do not get to walk away cleanly. I motion for Sarah, my second attorney, who silently steps forward and slides a thin, unmarked manila folder across the table, resting it beside the divorce papers. Marcus looks at the mysterious envelope, fresh terror blooming in his swollen eyes. The federal investigators already possess the primary forensic accounting report detailing your embezzlement scheme, I explained smoothly. However, during my initial audit, I also discovered an encrypted offshore holding account in the Cayman Islands. It contains the secondary evidence of your corporate fraud, including forged board signatures, hidden wire transfers, and illegal kickbacks you accepted from shady international vendors over the past 4 years. The authorities do not know about this specific account yet. Marcus turns a sickly shade of gray, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow as he realizes the catastrophic magnitude of my leverage. If you sign these divorce papers right now, exactly as written, I will keep that manila folder locked permanently inside my private corporate vault, I promise coldly. But if you hesitate for even a single second, David will personally hand-deliver this secondary evidence directly to the federal prosecutor's office this afternoon. You will spend the next 3 decades rotting inside a maximum security federal penitentiary. So, the finality of my threat breaks his resistance. Marcus completely shatters, letting out a loud, agonizing sob that tears from his chest. He is utterly defeated, surrounded by the smoking ruins of his fabricated empire with nowhere left to hide. With trembling fingers, he picks up the heavy silver pen resting beside the documents. Tears stream down his pale cheeks, splashing onto the crisp white paper, blurring the dark ink as he frantically signs his signature on every dotted line. He is literally signing his entire life away, binding himself to a future of inescapable poverty and federal punishment. I watch him complete the final page with a profound sense of absolute victory. As the pen drops from his shaking hand, clattering against the mahogany table, David swiftly steps forward and gathers the executed documents, securing them inside his leather binder. I smooth the immaculate fabric of my crimson blazer, taking one look at the broken man who once believed he was my master. Keisha is weeping silently in the corner, and Connor remains a paralyzed heap on the floor. I turn my back on their total devastation, walking out of the glass boardroom. The heavy double doors close firmly behind me, sealing them inside their self-made prison. I step into the bright, warm sunlight streaming through the corridor windows, finally free, incredibly powerful, and ready to conquer the entire world. 6 months pass with the rapid, breathtaking momentum of a perfectly executed corporate takeover. The crisp winter air has gracefully melted into a vibrant, blooming spring, mirroring the absolute transformation of my reality. The massive federal investigation into Marcus concluded with brutal, unyielding efficiency. His arrogant attempts to negotiate a favorable plea deal crumbled completely when prosecutors presented the undeniable mountain of secondary evidence I had meticulously handed over. He is currently serving a mandatory 10-year sentence in a medium-security federal penitentiary, stripped entirely of his custom-tailored suits and forced to wear a standard-issue uniform. He spends his days confined to a tiny concrete cell, devoid of the luxurious comfort he once believed he was entitled to possess. There are no expensive Scotch tastings, no exclusive golf weekends, and no admiring audiences to stroke his fragile, shattered ego. His name is officially blacklisted across the entire financial sector, a permanent glaring stain on his once pristine professional record. Vanessa never visited him once. She vanished into the sprawling city the exact moment his bank accounts were permanently frozen, leaving him to face the crushing reality of his absolute isolation alone. Across town, a different kind of prison holds Connor and Keisha captive. The swift, merciless liquidation of their entire financial portfolio forced them out of their sprawling suburban estate and directly into a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a noisy, low-income rental complex. The sheer poetic justice of their new living situation is absolute perfection. They spend every single agonizing day regretting the terrible, cruel choices they willingly made when they thought I was just a weak, defenseless target. They constantly turn their bitter anger on each other, blaming one another for their spectacular downfall. They now reside in the exact same type of neighborhood they once viciously mocked and associated with my fake ghetto roots. Their former friends from the elite country club completely severed all ties, treating their sudden poverty like a highly contagious disease. Keisha no longer spends her afternoons shopping at premium designer boutiques or attending lavish charity luncheons. Instead, she works long, exhausting shifts as a retail associate at a discount clothing store, forced to smile at customers she would have previously ignored. Connor, entirely stripped of his prestigious brokerage license and drowning in insurmountable debt, currently manages a small, struggling convenience store. His white knight arrogance and suffocating elitism have been completely crushed under the immense, unforgiving weight of their daily survival. The toxic illusion of their superiority has been permanently erased. Reclaiming the massive suburban mansion was about much more than just evicting Marcus. It was about purging his suffocating energy from the very foundation of the property. For 3 intense months, I personally oversaw the total gutting of the $2 million estate. I did not just replace the furniture my midnight crew had repossessed. I tore the house down to its literal bones. I walked through the dusty, echoing halls wearing a hard hat and designer boots, wielding a sledgehammer against the walls Marcus had arrogantly claimed as his own. I ordered the demolition crews to smash the tacky, oversized marble island where he had once slammed down those insulting divorce papers. We ripped out the gaudy, ostentatious crystal chandeliers he had chosen to impress his wealthy, shallow friends. Every single trace of his fake, unearned alpha male persona was violently stripped away and thrown into massive dumpsters in the driveway. In its place, I poured my soul into the architecture. As a woman who was once denied the right to study design, I utilized every ounce of my repressed brilliance. I drafted the blueprints late into the night, redesigning the floor plan to create sweeping open spaces filled with natural light. I imported rare dark mahogany from Brazil for the custom library. I selected deep, rich emerald green accents for the interior, a deliberate, triumphant nod to the childhood bedroom color my mother had strictly forbidden. I replaced the cold, sterile tiles with warm, hand-scraped hardwood floors. I installed floor-to-ceiling glass walls that overlooked the manicured gardens, ensuring the house no longer felt like a dark, silent prison, but an expansive, breathing sanctuary of absolute freedom. I watched the construction crews bring my vision to life, feeling a profound sense of healing, with every nail driven and every wall painted. The house was no longer a marital asset or a stage for Marcus's pathetic lies. It was a tangible, monumental manifestation of my resilience. I had taken the exact site of my deepest humiliation and meticulously transformed it into the ultimate fortress of my independence. Earlier that afternoon, hours before the first guest arrived at the mansion, I sat in the sprawling, sun-drenched library of my penthouse for an exclusive cover interview with the editor-in-chief of the nation's most prestigious financial magazine. For decades, my father had desperately chased the approval of this exact publication, hiring expensive public relations firms just to secure a tiny, insignificant mention in the back pages of their monthly issues. He had viewed a feature in this magazine as the ultimate undeniable validation of a man's worth. Now their top journalistic team had flown first class to Atlanta specifically to put my face on their global cover. The photographer snapped dozens of flawless portraits as I sat behind my custom mahogany desk, wearing a sharp, tailored ivory suit that perfectly contrasted with the dark, rich wood of my office. The editor, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn, leaned forward with her digital recorder running. She asked me about my unprecedented meteoric rise in a notoriously male-dominated industry. She asked about the swirling, fascinated rumors in the financial district, the hushed whispers of a bloodless coup, where a mysterious female tycoon had systematically dismantled 3 established legacy firms in a matter of weeks. She wanted to know the secret to my ruthless efficiency. I did not give her the satisfaction of delving into my personal family drama. I simply smiled a cool, practiced expression of absolute control. The secret, Evelyn, is that most legacy institutions are built on the fragile foundation of unearned privilege and monumental ego, I told her smoothly, my voice echoing with quiet authority. They operate under the delusion that their history makes them untouchable. I simply identify the structural rot they refuse to acknowledge, and I apply pressure until the entire decaying edifice collapses. I do not compete in their outdated games. I buy the board, I change the rules, and I eliminate the players who cannot adapt to the new reality. Evelyn nodded in profound respect, furiously scribbling notes, entirely captivated by the unyielding, impenetrable armor I had forged around myself. But the true masterpiece of my corporate expansion had yet to be officially announced to the public. As the interview concluded and my styling team began preparing me for the evening gala, David arrived with the final executed deeds for a project I had been secretly negotiating for the past 3 months. The collapse of my father's law firm and Connor's catastrophic bankruptcy had sent a massive, irreversible shockwave through their entire social ecosystem. The elite, exclusive Fairfield Country Club, the very institution where my mother had reigned as a toxic social dictator, the very golf course where Connor and Marcus had arrogantly plotted their shady business deals, had suffered a massive financial hemorrhage. With their wealthiest members either indicted, bankrupted, or fleeing the ensuing scandal, the club had quietly defaulted on its massive commercial mortgages. When the property went into extreme distress, Apex Capital Solutions swooped in like a silent predator in the night. We purchased the entire 300-acre estate for a fraction of its historical value. I did not buy it to play golf. I bought it to completely bulldoze the toxic elitist gates of my past. As my makeup artist applied a flawless dramatic contour and pinned my hair into an elegant updo, I reviewed the final architectural renderings of the Fairfield Initiative. I was going to tear down the pretentious, sprawling clubhouse and plow over the manicured 18-hole golf course. In its place, Horizon Group was breaking ground on a billion-dollar state-of-the-art sustainable urban center. The plans detailed magnificent towering glass structures featuring integrated vertical forests, affordable luxury residential lofts, and a massive fully funded corporate incubator, specifically designed to provide venture capital for young minority and women-led startups. I was taking the exact physical space where they had viciously gatekept their wealth and transforming it into a monument of accessible, limitless opportunity. This was not just real estate development. It was a profound architectural exorcism. Every single tree planted, every steel beam erected, and every glass window installed would stand as a towering, undeniable testament to my ultimate victory. As I slipped into my breathtaking custom sapphire gown, feeling the heavy, expensive fabric cascade perfectly around my silver heels, I looked at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The terrified, silenced girl who used to hide in her pale blue bedroom was completely gone. In her place stood a magnificent, terrifying force of nature. I was ready to unveil my masterpiece to the world. As I glide smoothly through the crowded, glittering ballroom of the reclaimed mansion later that evening, the room parts for me like the Red Sea. Waiters in crisp black tuxedos gracefully weave through the elite crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with beluga caviar, imported black truffles, and vintage Dom Perignon. The decadent aroma of the exquisite world-class catering fills the warm air, mingling perfectly with the soft ambient lighting of my bespoke crystal chandeliers. Suddenly, a familiar face steps into my path, hesitantly blocking my trajectory toward the grand staircase. It is Richard Sterling, Sr. Connor's incredibly wealthy and influential uncle, a man who once completely ignored my existence at family gatherings, treating me like a ghost. Tonight, however, he is holding his crystal glass with a slight tremor, his posture stooped in a submissive, deeply respectful bow. "Sienna," he stammers softly, his eyes darting nervously toward my lead attorney David, who stands rigidly a few feet away. "I just wanted to personally congratulate you on this magnificent evening. The transformation of this estate is truly breathtaking, and I wanted to formally apologize for my nephew's catastrophic behavior. The Sterling family has officially cut all ties with Connor. We find his actions utterly disgraceful. If Horizon Group is ever looking for secondary investors for your upcoming projects, my firm would be profoundly honored to offer our capital at whatever terms you deem appropriate." I look at the older, powerful man practically begging for a mere crumb of my corporate influence. 2 years ago, he would not have crossed the street to shake my hand. Now he is eagerly throwing his own nephew to the wolves just to secure a place in my good graces. I offer him a polite freezing, an entirely detached smile. "I appreciate your kind words, Richard," I reply smoothly, my voice devoid of any genuine warmth. "However, Apex Capital Solutions does not require outside funding. We are entirely self-sufficient. But please enjoy the champagne. It is a spectacular vintage." I do not wait for his response. I simply step gracefully around him, leaving him standing awkwardly in the crowd, completely dismissed and entirely irrelevant to my future. The ultimate power does not require screaming or intimidation. True power is the ability to casually reject the very people who once thought they owned the world. Tonight, however, my world is defined by absolute, undeniable triumph. The massive $2 million mansion, the very same property I ruthlessly stripped bare under the cover of darkness 6 months ago, has been completely transformed. I did not sell the estate. Instead, I aggressively utilized my premier design firm to entirely reimagine the sprawling space, turning it into the ultimate crown jewel of my corporate portfolio. The sterile white walls and echoing wooden floors have been replaced with breathtaking bespoke elegance. Vibrant abstract art hangs perfectly under custom ambient lighting. Imported velvet furniture rests gracefully on hand-woven silk rugs. The grand foyer sparkles brilliantly under a massive cascading crystal chandelier that demands immediate attention from anyone walking through the heavy oak doors. Tonight, the house is not just a residence. It is a magnificent living showroom, hosting the most exclusive corporate gala of the entire social season. I glide smoothly through the crowded, glittering ballroom, wearing a stunning custom sapphire gown that moves like liquid water around my silver heels. The room is packed with the most influential investors, elite real estate developers, and powerful tech executives in the entire metropolitan area. Every single guest in attendance is here to celebrate the massive, unprecedented success of Apex Capital Solutions and Prestige Staging. They look at me with genuine, unadulterated respect and profound professional admiration. I am no longer the quiet, overlooked wife standing passively in the shadows of arrogant, deeply flawed men. I am the undeniable architect of my own massive empire. As the live jazz quartet concludes their opening set, the gentle clinking of crystal glasses begins to quiet down. The room's attention naturally shifts toward the grand mahogany staircase where I am standing. David hands me a sleek silver microphone. The sheer silence of the massive ballroom is intoxicating. Hundreds of the most powerful people in the city are waiting with bated breath for my words. "Good evening." I begin, my voice projecting with crystal clear authority, echoing beautifully against the vaulted ceilings of the reclaimed mansion. 2 years ago, this very estate was built on a foundation of profound lies, terrifying insecurity, and desperate financial illusions. It was occupied by people who believed that true power was derived from suffocating others, from judging those they deemed unworthy, and from stealing what they could not legitimately earn. I pause, making eye contact with a row of elite venture capitalists who are nodding in absolute agreement. I spent a significant portion of my life being told to shrink myself. I was told to pack my trash and leave. I was treated like a silent accessory, a pathetic underachiever destined for a life of poverty, simply because I refused to play their toxic, cruel social games. But the fundamental mistake my detractors made was entirely underestimating what happens to a woman when she is forced to live in the shadows. A ripple of awe sweeps through the glittering crowd. I raise my chin, feeling the blinding warmth of the crystal chandelier overhead. In the shadows, you do not burn, you build. When they refused to give me a seat at their prestigious table, I did not beg for an invitation. I quietly bought the entire building, I fired the management, and I built my own table from scratch. Prestige Staging and Apex Capital Solutions were born from the absolute necessity of survival. We do not just invest in commercial real estate, we invest in unyielding resilience. We identify the rot, we clear it out, and we construct undeniable empires on top of the ashes. The crowd erupts into thunderous, genuine applause. It is not the polite, fake clapping of country club events. It is the raw, enthusiastic validation of titans recognizing a superior force. I smile, handing the microphone back to David as the jazz band strikes up a triumphant new melody. This house is completely mine. This city is completely mine. The soft, melodic hum of a live jazz quartet floats through the warm evening air, mingling seamlessly with the cheerful clinking of expensive crystal glasses and bright, authentic laughter. I politely excuse myself from a highly lucrative conversation with a group of international venture capitalists and make my way toward the sweeping marble staircase. I walk gracefully up to the second floor, the soft fabric of my gown brushing gently against the polished steps, and step out onto the expansive master balcony. The cool night breeze instantly refreshes my skin as I look down at the vibrant, glowing celebration spilling out onto the manicured green lawns and illuminated pool deck below. My lead corporate attorney, David, and my brilliant logistics director quietly join me on the balcony. They are the loyal, fiercely dedicated partners who helped me execute the flawless dismantling of my enemies. We do not speak about Marcus or the pathetic remnants of his shattered family. They are entirely irrelevant, completely erased from the glorious narrative of my future. David gently raises his crystal flute, filled with premium imported champagne. I raise my own glass, the delicate crystal catching the bright glowing light from the mansion behind us. We clink our glasses together, the sharp, clear sound ringing like a beautiful victory bell in the quiet night air. I take a slow, satisfying sip of the crisp champagne, letting the exquisite taste linger on my tongue. I step forward, resting my hands lightly on the smooth stone balustrade, and look out over the sprawling, glittering city skyline. The towering skyscrapers and bright lights stretch endlessly toward the horizon, a massive landscape of limitless potential and unimaginable wealth. The heavy chains of emotional abuse, suffocating neglect, and constant underestimation have been completely shattered. I breathe in the crisp, clean air, feeling a profound, intoxicating sense of absolute liberation wash over my entire being. I am completely free, massively rich, and absolutely untouchable forever.